Hello, my quilting friends. My name is Leah Day, and I have a new long arm. This is the 21X Elite, and today I am doing all of the little tiny things. I am winding a bobbin, threading the machine, getting my foot to the right height, inserting a needle, all that good stuff. And I can't wait to show you how to do it. So let's get started getting to know a brand new long arm. So here is my display for the 21X Elite. It is a 7-inch display and it is touchscreen controlled. So don't get confused with this display when I have QCT. It's attached with my tablet, my separate tablet up here. This is simply the display for the long arm itself. So here we go. I've got stitch regulated mode precise, cruise, manual is stitching at a set speed, not using the stitch regulator, and then we've got a based function too. Over here we've got some little lines. What do those do? We've got settings and help. Let's see what settings we can set. We can set the screen brightness. We can dial this down so it's not nearly as bright, or we could jack it up. Needle area brightness. Now I have to kind of dim this simply because I film and sometimes a really bright light can mess up my cameras, but you will probably want that at max because it's really nice to be able to see what you're stitching. Now needle button, needle up down, definitely want my needle up down. You can also do a single stitch, so that's going to go all the way down and all the way back up. I like needle up down. Needle stop, I want the needle always to stop in the down position. We've got an overspeed sound. That means whenever you are moving the long arm and you're moving it too fast, it will beep at you. I'm going to turn that off. But we also have an overspeed light where the screen here will flash. I'm going to leave that on. Edge warning sound, I'm probably going to turn that off as well. I don't like sounds, me personally. I do like, though, the flashing monitor. That works for me better. You're going to just tailor these to how you like it to sound. I do like clicks, like whenever I use the handlebars, that kind of thing. I like that a lot. So I'm going to leave the click on, and then you can change this from inches to centimeters too. We also have a factory reset button and system info if you're ever needing that. We also have a whole lot of help files, and these are pulled from your manual, and they're going to cover everything from threading your machine, winding the bottom bobbin, choosing your needle. I know I always forget how to wind this particular threading path and have to go check my manual, so that is going to be super useful to have right here on the long arm. Maintenance, this covers your oiling guide, where to put oil, where to put your needle in order to oil the best. Being able to get to that hole back here in the top of the machine. All of this is super useful. Troubleshooting, maintenance, using the touchscreen, all of that good stuff. So definitely refer to your help area, your help files right there whenever you need it. Okay, so I like my stitches per inch. SPI is stitches per inch, and I like that set at 16, the highest it can go, because I like really tiny stitches. So that's just the setting that I'm going to set. Here is our toolbox, and these are all new settings. These are all new extra features with our 21X Elite. So measuring tool, this is going to allow you to set an origin point. So right here, I'm going to set it right over here, and I'm going to roll the machine over, and we can see, okay, that little space that I rolled measures 2.85 inches. Now I didn't move it hardly any because I've got channel locks set up, so I didn't move it hardly any vertically, but I also moved it, it considers it diagonal, but you notice that these two measurements are the exact same. You can also right here change this from inches to centimeters too. Reset your origin, and that restores it back to 0. Or resets it to that exact point. So here I'm going to set it all the way over here, reset the origin. So now it's going to go from this spot, and then as I roll it over, You see it's calculating. And this is going to be super useful whenever you're working on a wonky quilt and you're like, I wonder if those blocks are square. You can quickly go in, measure the top edge, measure the bottom edge, and see if that block is square. Also, you can measure the diagonals because a square block will have the same measurement through both diagonals. It's one of those fun things to do, definitely something I'm going to be using. Let's go in. We've got a calculator here. Oh my gosh, I can't tell you how many times I have needed to just quickly break something down, especially for QCT, wanting to know how many things I can fit into an area without actually having QCT on. This is going to be super useful. So now let's check out the next one. We have got a Bobbin estimator. We have to turn this on, looks like, maybe. Select bobbin. We need to add a bobbin. We're going to call this, I'm going to wind my bobbin in white. And so I hit enter. Then my bobbin estimator is on. A full bobbin length is estimated at 55 yards. So I haven't done any stitching, so it is still estimating at the full 55 yards. So that'll be kind of interesting to see how that plays out as we do some stitching together. Now our edge warning. Basically what we're going to do, this is kind of like setting up our space with QCT. We're going to go ahead and set our top left, and then you would roll your machine over to the bottom right, and then you would set that bottom right. Now, I just rolled it like literally some inches, so that's not really enough space to play with. But this would tell you if you're getting close to your edge, let's say maybe 1 inch from your edge or 1/2 inch from your edge, or you can turn it off. You don't have to have this on. This will be super, super helpful when you are quilting pantos. Oh my gosh, this will be a game changer, because from when you're quilting pantographs, you're quilting from the back of the frame and your eyes are not on the quilt. So you can set this edge warning and be able to see on the back monitor. If you get rear handlebars on the 21X Elite, you're going to end up with this monitor on the back too. And you'll be able to see that flashing light, or you'll be able to hear that warning and know that you're getting to the edge of your quilt. So that will be super, super helpful. So I'm just going to turn this off and reset it so that way I don't have any tiny little edge warnings going on. Obviously I didn't move it far enough in order for it to be useful. All right, so here we go. We've got project and lifetime. You can see I've only taken 3 stitches in the whole lifetime of this machine. Our project though, this can help you calculate. Like let's say you are quilting for a person and you want to be able to charge a certain number of, price per stitches or a certain price per hour. If you are a long arm quilter and that is how you're calculating your price, this is really going to be useful for you, because you can reset your project. That's going to start over at 0. You're going to load that quilt. You'll need to keep up with your hours of loading, the amount of time it takes there. But as soon as you start stitching, hit that reset button and you'll have that logged into your project, and you'll know just how much time in hours or how much thread and stitches that project took. And this will be really interesting too if you keep up with the number of bobbins. Your bobbins to stitches ratio will also help you then estimate, if you have another project, how many bobbins you need to wind at the beginning. So that is pretty much it for our display. I noticed that we have this little bobbin icon now, and yeah, this is where we set our bobbin. So if we're winding a new bobbin, another color, we can add that. We can use our white bobbin that I'm about to wind with you guys, and we can have that selected right here. So no matter how many bobbins you're changing out, how many thread colors you're using, you can have that set right there from the front screen, from just our main display screen. That's super useful. So now let's install our needle, and this can be a little complicated. I mean, it's really just installing your needle, but it's one of those things that if we don't get this right, it can throw off our tension. It can actually cause the entire bobbin area to get off on timing. So it pays to take a little bit of time to get your needle inserted right. So first off, the type of needle I am using is one of our Grace Company size 18 MR needles. And I am using our little needle alignment magnet. The front of the needle is flat, so this magnet just hooks right on. It can go right over the eye of the needle, and it just gives you a better view of where that needle is pointing. So you're not installing it wrong, something like that. You really want that magnet, that direction of the eye of the needle, to be nice and straight towards you. That's according to the manual. Now, I have personally found that you can wiggle this ever so slightly to the left and right. You can go a little bit maybe to the 5 o'clock or a little bit to the 7 o'clock, depending on your thread. Now, if you find that you're having tension issues with your needle just set straight like this, just play with that. Angle the needle ever so slightly over to one direction. See if those tension issues or the thread breaks continue. If it does, then just try angling it ever so slightly towards the 7 o'clock position. See if that resolves it. Just understand that there's a little bit of play here, not a lot. So this is not good, but just a little bit of an angle can sometimes relieve some tension issues and thread breaks. I'm going to go straight on. That's just my habit. Tighten that screw and make sure there's a little hole right here above that screw. Get over there with a little flashlight. Make sure, look into that little hole. Make sure that the top of your needle is filling that hole completely, because you want your needle to be fully seated into the machine. If it's not fully seated, then the needle is extending too long, and where is it going to go? Straight into your bobbin case. So definitely keep track of that. Make sure that your needle is fully seated, and then keep your little magnet tucked up in the little plastic baggie that it comes in. That's super, super useful. So now it's time to wind a bobbin, and I like Isacord thread. This is my favorite thread for quilting, any sort of free motion quilting, walking foot quilting, whether I'm using a home sewing machine or a long arm. It does come on spools, and those spools feed from the top. Now, every once in a while I'll get a spool that for some odd reason just wants to spool off too fast. And so I've gotten into the habit of using a thread net. Now, this is how I use it, because it's very easy for these to just slip right off the top. I slide it on to about halfway through the thread net, and then I take the whole rest of the thread net and I tuck it up inside the base, just like so. And then I place it on my spool stand, and I like to use this back spool stand, and that works great for me. The spool stand then grips the thread net and keeps it from sliding off. So that is kind of my method for threading from my spool. And then I'm going to take my thread. I went up and over the thread mast. That's out of the shot, but it's threading from the top. And then now I'm going to go front, so the front of the machine to the back of the machine here, through that hole, then again loop it around, and front of the machine to the back of the machine for the second hole. So now we're going to wind our bobbin tensioner, and there is just a small hole on a little tail, like a metal tail right here. You thread through the hole and then around that tensioner, and make sure, always remember, with tensioners on our Qnique Longarms, these are always under tension, meaning they're always being squished hard together. So you have to thread, like floss the thread through that tensioner, and that feels like it's a little bit strong on tension, so I'm going to loosen that up just a little bit. And this is going to be something you might have to play with depending on your thread. You might have to loosen the tension, increase the tension. There's also a height adjustment here. You might have to raise or lower that height. Now, this is the key to winding these bobbins, because they're slippery and they don't have any holes to send the thread tail through. So I go around 2 or 3 times, then I pass that thread tail underneath the leading thread into it, and then I give it a tug. What that does is that just catches that thread tail and loops it with the leading thread. And what's nice is this will spool off in order, so this will spool off. It never catches on the bobbin, so I've never had the bobbin actually get like stuck at the end whenever it has finished unwinding. Okay, I'm going to just click that over, and it is an automatic bobbin winder, so it will automatically begin filling. I like to just run the Isacord through my fingertips. As you can see, I don't necessarily have to do this. I just like to do it. It's a habit. I'm not pinching it or anything. I'm just letting the thread run over my finger just simply to keep it nicely organized. You're going to develop your own little unique habits when it comes to quilting, and this is one of mine. I do this on all of my machines. Isacord is slightly slippery. It likes to pop out of guides. It likes to pop out of springs, and that's why I just run it through my fingers. So there we go. We have our first bobbin wound, and this usually comes up in the question, so I'll just go ahead and address it here. This bobbin was already wound and installed here on the top of the bobbin winder when I opened up my long arm. I will unwind this completely and make it a naked bobbin and then wind it fresh with Isacord. I don't know what this thread is. It could be Grace Company's thread. It could be another brand of thread. I don't know how old it is. I don't know the conditions it was wound in, or how long it was in a box, or how long it was exposed to air. I could have really bad stitches, really bad quilting experience with this bobbin because of all the things I don't know. So I take the mystery out of it. I don't work with mystery bobbins. I always wind my bobbin fresh with the thread I'm using on the top. So if I'm using white Isacord on the top, I wind a bobbin with white Isacord for the bobbin. And that's how I get great stitches. That's how I check my tension. That's how I do everything with quilting. I always match the same thread on the top with the same thread on the bobbin. Now let's thread our machine. Now I normally would use the same color thread in the top and bobbin, but I know I'm going to be doing a tension test, and I really wanted you to be able to see the thread through my threading guides, and the white was just blending in too much. So that's why I've switched to this orange. And I like to go from back to front on this top pin guide, and then counterclockwise and back to front on that second guide. So this is something unique to me, and using Isacord, I just find that this works better. The manual has you going around this pin clockwise. Now I'm going to go into this guide and make sure to floss through the spring, making sure that the thread is going between those two little tension discs, and then through this guide here. Now, this is what I messed up the first time I shared this video. I forgot to thread this guide, and we want to hit this guide and then hit our bobbin tensioner. And whenever you go through your tensioner, make sure to floss the thread again, pulling it tight between those discs and pulling it back and forth, so that way the thread is definitely fully seated within that tensioner. Remember, long arms are under tension all the time, which means that this is not less whenever the foot is up and more when the foot is down. It is always under tension. So you've got to floss it to make sure that the thread is fully seated. So that looks good. Make sure that your thread is coming out in the middle of that bouncy spring so that when you tug on it, it bounces up and down. Then we're going to go around the bottom of this elbow, and then we're going to thread through the hole here on this lifter. This is what bounces up and down as our needle goes up and down. So making sure that that is threaded properly and that you haven't hung up, you haven't accidentally twisted the thread around twice around any of these guides. As you pull on it, the thread does have tension. You do feel the tension of the thread, but it does not feel stuck. It does not feel locked in place. That would be a sign that you probably made some mistake somewhere within that threading. And now we go down to this bottom pigtail and just swing around, and we're ready to thread above the needle. So here's another angle for threading this pigtail. I take the thread like this, I take it straight back and then forward. That looks good. And then now I'm going to thread this little hole right here above the needle. And this is really easy to miss. I missed that once and had such terrible tension issues. It really makes a big difference. And then through the needle. Now, if you have trouble threading any of these, we do have a new magnifying system, so definitely use that, be able to see a little bit better. Now let's get our foot to the right height. I want to drop my needle into the down position because our feet hop up and down ever so slightly on our Qnique Longarms. And when our needle is up, our foot is at the highest height. So we want the needle in the down position. You can use your needle down on the handlebars, but turns out that jog forward and jog backward, that actually drops your needle down in increments. So you can just keep hitting that jog forward button until the foot starts coming back, the needle starts coming back up again. And so it's all the way down, and I can place this hopping foot height gauge. It has that little slot. I'm going to place that around the needle just like so, and then drop the foot down and center it. You have a little play here. You see that, guys? You have play up and down, you have play side to side. So try and get the needle in the center and also pressed down against that hopping foot height gauge. So I'm just going to tighten up that screw. I'm using my 3mm Allen wrench here, and I'm going to keep that handy close to my machine, and then we'll just take that hopping foot height gauge away. Now the most important thing with this as you drop your needle down is just making sure that your needle was set to the proper height before you drop it down into the machine. Obviously, if you have only just inserted the needle and it's not all the way in, it's going to be extending too long, and it's going to cause you some problems down in your bobbin area. So make sure, double check that your needle is fully seated. Remember, look on that side. There's a little hole right above the needle screw. Make sure that your needle is all the way up into the machine before dropping it down. Now it's time to check in on our bobbin tension. Make sure that our bobbin is properly wound into the bobbin case, and also that the case itself is putting the right amount of tension onto the bobbin. Now I like to do this over a loaded quilt on my frame. If I don't have a loaded quilt on my frame, I'll do this right over a carpeted floor, meaning something soft. It's really easy to drop your bobbin or drop your bobbin case. Please don't do this somewhere where you can drop either of these two things on a hard surface, like a tabletop. These easily get dented. The spring inside your bobbin can easily fall out. So make sure you can do this where you can drop it and it'll bounce and it'll be on something very soft. So I have wound my bobbin. The thread is spooling off clockwise. I'm going to place it into the case with the open part face up. So I place it inside and then wind through the guides. Now there are lots and lots of diagrams on how to wind your bobbin within your manual, so please refer to that. But here's the most important thing is I do a bobbin tension test. I hold the thread coming out of the bobbin and I let go of it. I let it spool down into my hand. Okay, you can hold onto the thread and then just move your hand further down. All right, this is too loose. Okay, the bobbin is spooling down all on its own like a yo-yo, super fast. So what I want to do is increase the tension on this bobbin case. So here on the side you have the screw that's kind of a bigger screw and it's surrounded by a circle of metal. That's the one you want to adjust. To increase the tension, you turn the screw clockwise. To decrease the tension, you turn the screw counterclockwise. Now I'm going to turn by literally a quarter turn. I went from basically the 12 o'clock position on that screw to the 3 o'clock position, and that's going to be as slowly as I increase this tension. I don't want to put massive amounts of tension on it, just small in increments. So now I can hold the bobbin up by the thread. Now when I shake it, this is what I want to see. When I shake the thread, the bobbin slowly spools out. Now this might be a little bit too much tension. I'm having to shake it kind of hard. So it's a balancing act. This is something that I have developed over years of quilting on home sewing machines, on quilting on long arms. This is what works for me. I like this level of tension. I think I'm going to loosen this just slightly. I mean like a hair, so that I don't have to shake it quite so hard. There, that's, getting there. And I might have to put this in my machine and play with it a little bit. I might have to go back and forth adjusting it. But that right there is exactly what I'm looking for. I'm hanging onto the thread, I'm shaking it slightly, and that bobbin case is spooling down. And when I'm not shaking it, it's holding steady. But you see this position and you see how fast this could fall apart and fall on the floor. This is why I do this over a loaded quilt or over a carpeted floor, like literally 12 inches from the floor, so that way the bobbin case or the bobbin do not fall and ping off something hard. Now, If you do lose the spring out of your bobbin case, I have found that those springs are really, really hard to reinsert without bending the spring and getting it thrown off. That can cause tension issues too. So if you drop your bobbin and you lose the spring inside, what I do then is I replace the spring with a Mega Genie Magic Bobbin Washer. I just usually replace it with one, and that works really well for me. I don't try and reinsert the spring. I also don't use the bobbin washers if I still have a spring in the bobbin case. So this is one of those things where you don't need it unless you lose the spring, in which case then I replace the spring with a bobbin washer. So I hope that that makes sense. I hope that you will be very careful adjusting the tension on your bobbin case because it's one of those fiddly things that is easy to get wrong. So be careful with that, guys. Take your time. Make sure you're working over a loaded quilt. I am ready to pop this into my machine, and we are finally ready to start stitching. If you'd like to learn more about this awesome 21X Elite Longarm, come and check it out at leahday.com/21. I gotta say, straight out of the box, I was a little skeptical. I was like, well, it looks like a 21. I don't really know how much different this is gonna be, but just going through the menu, all the options, the way I can set my preferences, the lighting, all that good stuff, guys, I'm already in love with this machine and I haven't even taken a single stitch. So I cannot wait to start quilting. In the next video, we are going to begin quilting together, baste stitching across the top of this quilt, getting our quilt ready to go, and then doing some first stitches. I'm going to show you the designs that I use to set the tension on my machine to get everything going smoothly. So I hope that you're looking forward to that. Until next time, let's go quilt.